and I'm the development coordinator for the Iowa City Public Library. And so I'm here both as a person to welcome you to the library and then also as a panelist today. There will be a Q&A at a certain point, and when we do that, I'm going to ask for a volunteer to run this microphone around because my bunch of my staff is on vacation, so I don't have any help with that today. I just want to thank you for being here, and I'll hand it over to our host.
Well, thank you all for being here. My name is Chastity Dillard. I am serving as the membership chair for the Association of Fundraising Professionals here at our Eastern Iowa chapter. And we came together and as development directors in this community and decided that we wanted to just have an open conversation with the community and fellow development directors, executive directors, and everyone I just mentioned, to just talk about how we are surviving as a nonprofit world right now. So as Katie said, if you have any questions or you want to chime in, we kind of want this to be more of a community conversation versus just a panel discussion. So you can raise your hand, we'll bring a mic to you as we're going through on our discussion. So I'll go ahead and kick it off.
Yeah, and I'll just note this is being taped and will be on the library channel, just so folks know about that piece of it. And that's why it's extra important for us to use the microphone when people have questions so that people that are tuning in are able to hear those questions.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and kick it off, and I would love to have our lovely guests introduce themselves, just say how you're connected to the community.
Okay, great. I guess I'll go first since I'm right here. My name is Angelica Vanetta. I'm the Senior Manager of Community Outreach and Engagement at United Way, East Central Iowa, up in Cedar Rapids. I have worked in the nonprofit space for about 20 years now, and I did also get connected with Chastity when I was working as the Development Director for Shelter House here in Iowa City for a few years. I started at United Way in Cedar Rapids in 2020, 2 months before the pandemic. So that first year of employment was wild. I do community building work now, so I have stepped away from day-to-day fundraising, but I think the perspective that I can share with you all are what can members of the community do or donors do if they can't make the same type of contributions that maybe they had in the past as far as philanthropy goes. So I'm happy to answer any questions and just kind of talk about how the last 6 months have been going, plus 6 months plus have been going for the nonprofit community in Cedar Rapids.
I'm Katie Roche, the Development Director for the Iowa City Public Library Friends Foundation and the Development Coordinator for the Iowa City Public Library. I've had some different roles here in Iowa City in the last 20 years. I was the original Executive Director for Summer of the Arts when it first came together, bringing together the Iowa Arts Festival, Iowa City Jazz Festival, Friday Night Concert Series, and we started the Saturday Night Free Movie Series that first year that I was there. I've also was the development director for the Englert Theater for 11 years, and of course have served on a lot of different boards and in different roles throughout the community. And I also work as a fundraising and nonprofit consultant in the area. I'm excited to have this conversation today. I think Angelica made a really good point about there being a lead up beyond the 6 months. I think we've all been seeing funding cuts, programmatic resources being depleted, and even like fewer volunteers and fewer board members. Just everything is sort of being starved out, and so we're figuring out how to I think. Professionally react to this, but then also there's like the psychological, emotional, spiritual piece of it, I think, that we're all trying to survive as well, and I think that's important to also talk about that a little bit.
Thank you both. I'm going to reintroduce myself. I'm also a development director here. I work for the Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County, and I have been in that position for almost 11 years, and I've learned a lot from these two ladies here in the community. So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll continue. So either Katie or Angelica, we've seen a lot of changes, as we've already mentioned this year, since the beginning of this year. And from your perspective, what shifted most in the fundraising or funding landscape over the last 6 months?
I mean, Katie did refer to it earlier. I think a lot of the nonprofit organizations are seeing funding cuts from some grants that we have typically received in the past, funders at the state and federal level. But we have seen, again, there's been an economic downturn, and so we've seen fewer and smaller contributions than we have in the past from our donors. And we have been, as I'm sure all nonprofits have been, very honest with the community about what cuts we're seeing. So yeah, I mean, that's really what it is it's fewer donations from the individual contributor and then from some of the grant programs.
Yeah, I think in library world, there's just a lot of uncertainty around how the federal funding changes will affect programs and specifically interconnectedness of libraries across the state of Iowa, which is what the state library really excels at with the funding that they get from the federal government. We don't exactly know still how that's going to be affected. There's currently an injunction against that funding being held back in the state of Iowa. Isn't currently advancing all the funds, even though the injunction's in place. So there's just a lot of question marks around that. And then I think the other piece is, these are really, long-standing pieces of funding that we've become reliant on, which is, I think, maybe precisely why that funding has been cut. I think some of the folks that are making those cuts are very interested in, cutting it off and saying, be self-reliant. But that's not really what the arrangement of nonprofits, the nonprofit sector is. You invest in us and we invest back in our communities and we have an incredible return on investment. And so to pull the rug out really quickly doesn't give us the opportunity that other businesses and other arenas would have to create potentially the way to supplement those funds. So so I think generalized uncertainty, and then the other piece that I'd like to address is just the anti-trans legislation in the state of Iowa, anti-LGBTQ legislation, which affects our workforce and affects our ability to retain quality workers and have people who feel like they can safely work in this state, and that's really, really disruptive.
Yeah, thank you both. I definitely can relate from my own work and how, at least the families and everyone that we're working with, how they're feeling in these moments of uncertainty. So I'd love you both to just talk about how these changes have been showing up day to day in your work throughout the days.
I mean, again, a lot of it just has to do with us as individual employees in the nonprofit space. I'm assuming they impact everybody, but sometimes it's challenging to move forward when you know that you have a really huge hill to overcome. But at the same time, I think also just showing up for your colleagues and those individuals in the community, and just being someone who they can talk to and just share their feelings and thoughts with. I did also want to make a point too, and I think this relates to your question as well as what we were discussing before. Our United Way, as I'm certain that the United Way here in Johnson and Washington counties has made a very concerted effort in ensuring that we continue to fund our partners at the same level that we had committed to during our RFP process. So we recognize that there are funding cuts in other spaces, but we're still going to do what we can to continue the funding, and if that means cutting back on budgets in other ways, we'll do that so that we can make sure that we are ensuring that our funded partners are receiving the dollars and support that they need as well.
I think that really just points to the frugality with which nonprofits operate all the time. We're not just throwing money in the air and seeing if it blows away in the wind. That's not how we work. We're always really smart about and planful. I think the other you addressed a lot of what I would want to say, but I think the onslaught of legislation that we're all having to interpret and understand and figure out how that might affect our operations and our service points, that should not be what our full-time job is. That should not be the way that we're having to spend our time. And it's this exhausting amount of information that we're having to interpret and understand. And we don't have people on our staff that's their job. we have other jobs that we do. So we're all having to learn, new skills. We're having to, be in constant communication with our teams to understand what it means. And I think that piece of it really can't be underestimated because, if you were to ask me how much time I spent trying to understand what was happening in the last 6 months, I would say a lot, most of it. Mm-hmm. I still managed to do all of my work and do my primary job, but I also was doing that. And that means that, my organization, are they getting my best work? Are they getting my most innovative self? Are they truly benefiting from my skills and my leadership? I hope so. I hope the answer is yes to that, but I also know that I'm being pulled in a million directions, and I think I saw a lot of heads nodding in the room, so I think everybody's feeling the same way.
Yeah, and if I could just add on that as well, I know one of the things that we're working on doing is creating advocacy ambassadors or champions, individuals in the community who can share those impacts regarding specific legislation on how that is contributing to our nonprofit work. One website that actually really helped me in being able to understand the depth and breadth and the full scope of everything that's happening with those executive orders is the National Council of Nonprofits has just a list of all of the executive orders and then how they specifically impact nonprofits, and it's broken out into different categories. And I did actually have that pulled up because I'm on that site pretty often. But obviously the diversity, equity, inclusion piece, and then it also breaks down between different federal government fundings and so forth. So that's the National Council of Nonprofits is a great website to go to track all of those executive orders.
Yes, so what I heard from both of you is that it's uncertain. We're just trying to live day by day. And so I'm wondering what you would say to someone who's still struggling to figure that out daily, or how to not succumb to panic or fatigue in these moments.
Well, first off, I'd say, you're not going to always have good days in this situation. I definitely had some pretty dark days with this where I felt panicked and scared and doomed and full of grief. And that's real. And we can't pretend like that's not real when you feel like everything that you and your colleagues are working for to make the world a better place is uncertain. It's pretty scary. And so that's okay. So have a lot of grace with yourself. And then on a professional level, I decided going into this next year that I'm going to schedule a lighter load for myself during the legislative session. I've said that for years, but I think it's a necessity this time around. Fewer events, fewer engagements, fewer long days where I'm agreeing to go serve on, this, that, or the other thing. And maybe I'm doing a little less community outreach during that time because I'm trying to conserve my energy to take on this extra work that is inevitably coming our way in the next legislative session because I have to reserve my resources.
Yeah, and I would echo everything that you had said. I think for me, I try to find joy in something every single day. I try to smile, I try to laugh, because that is what just keeps me upbeat as much as possible. And then just more tactical things too. I think sometimes we can just be so incredibly overwhelmed on all of the things that are happening, and then what are all the things that we can do, right? So find one or two things that you're really good at that maybe brings you joy. If you're the type of person that is really comfortable having one-on-one conversations with family members about how the nonprofit space is being impacted, do that. If you're someone who can organize protests and really enjoys the organization of that and coordinating speakers, et cetera, do that. And then also really focus your own energies on one or two issues or causes that are incredibly important to you. Because again, if we try to address all the things that are happening in all the ways that they're happening, we're just going to stretch ourselves far too thin, and then we won't be any good to anyone. So it is really important to just kind of narrow that down. I think as long as we are doing something, we are making a difference.
Thank you so much. This leads me into my next question. Just as we're talking, what is something or what are things that you wish the public and funders still knew that that they don't know about right now, about everything that nonprofits have been struggling with the last 6 months?
I think it'd be really excellent for the public to know that almost all of our organizations need volunteer support and need board service. There was I don't know where exactly I got this information from, but it might have been through the greater IC, or I'm not sure. There was some survey that went out, and it was just talking about how board service is like at an all-time low. Like everybody is just really struggling to fill their boards up. My board of directors had to reduce the number of board members we had by 2 because we didn't think we were going to have enough board members. We were able to get 2 more board members, but now that number is lower, so that if we lose anyone in the next year for whatever reason, we'll be able to keep that going. So I think it's important for the public to know that. I think it would be important for the public to understand that any size of donation can be really helpful. Whether your household is a $10 one-time person or a $10 a month person or a $100 a month person, have that conversation in your household about what you care about and what you want to support, because individual support, household support is going to be extremely important in these coming years as federal uncertainty with funding happens. And then I think finally, if you have a nonprofit that you favor, that you believe in what they're doing, I can't tell you how many just words of love and support the library received at the top of this year, as our librarians were being accused of grooming, of doing terrible things that don't happen in libraries. It was so hurtful and misguided, and we would receive, for every one of those things, we would receive multiple emails and comments from the public about how much they value their library. And we circulate those notes to our staff, and it's so heartening and it's so helpful. So for all of us, we need to remember, if you get a note like that, share it, because it means a lot to the staff. And then if you're just, if you're somebody who's like, hey, I think you're doing great work over at United Way. Hey, I think you're doing great work over at United Way.
Thank you.
and make sure you're spreading that information around, because we need a little gas in our tank on a daily basis to make it through these times.
Yeah, I mean, that's all great information, and I don't know that I would have much more to add. I know the answer, but maybe the folks in the audience would be curious as to why boards are having a hard time staffing with volunteers. Have you heard anything from your board members as to why they don't want to serve on your boards?
I don't know if anybody out there has any inklings about it. I suspect that the noise is so loud right now that it's really hard to focus. I think families are trying to survive both financially and also like psychologically during these times. And I found myself during the beginning of the Doge efforts, as this kind of just rain of information was coming down, really not feeling like I could even consider what I was doing that evening. I was like, well, how could I even think about that? I have to think about this right now. So, I suspect that it's just our inability to sort of prioritize in moments like that and see the bigger picture. It's a really powerful tactic, actually, to make it harder for people to kind of think through.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly what I would assume as well. And then just kind of to circle back to your point about volunteers for nonprofit organizations, one of the things that we are asking of our champions is to invite 2 or 3 people to any event that you go to. So not just talk about it, but say, hey, would you join me? Would you come with me to this event? Because the more folks that we can get in front of the nonprofit community, the more we can start to recruit those volunteers to serve in other capacities. So that's just one little thing that you can say, hey, you know what? I'm going to this. Do you want to come with me?
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about, advocacy, and what is the role do you believe fundraisers and nonprofit professionals should play in policy conversations, and how do we bring our donors and our volunteers and community supporters along with that conversation?
I have a government position, so mine is a little bit more fraught in some ways, though the board of directors for the foundation that I work for did vote to introduce advocacy into our the way that we describe ourselves as an organization and the work that we do in the world a year before all of this was really taking hold. As a preemptive measure to make sure that we were focusing on the right work that we wanted to do. So for us, with advocacy, that has meant that the foundation now has a newsletter that is separate from the library's communications, that is able to inform the public of the challenges that we're facing and the ways in which people can be a part of advocating for the work that we're doing. You might say, why didn't you guys have that before? Well, libraries were never under attack to this extent before. Advocacy in the past was tell people how much you like your library. It wasn't, we're possibly going to lose all of our funding and librarians are going to be criminalized and penalized and, for distributing quote unquote illicit materials. These were this is an extreme that we hadn't faced before, and then on a nonprofit level, I mean, nonprofits are allowed to advocate for themselves. A lot of nonprofits don't think that they're allowed to advocate for themselves, but they are. There's rules around it. There's rules of conduct. There's ways that you can and cannot do that. But I think dispelling that that rumor is important. And then also in terms of advocacy, I think coordination across whatever sector you work in so that there's not a huge duplication of that work. So for the work that I do, that's looking at the work that the Iowa Library Association is doing, the Public Library Association is doing, United for Libraries is doing, and really leaning on them in their leadership and making sure that we're able to help the public understand the framing around the challenges that we're facing. And then I think also leaning into your own personal networks. We have our professional networks, but I have a personal email that I send from my personal email to people that I've known in this town for 20 years. And I say, I don't know if you know about this advocacy email. I don't know if you know what's going on. I would say I get a larger response from that than I do from anything that I do through my professional channels, because this is me personally reaching out and saying, I'm really concerned and I want to make sure that you're aware. And so I think we're having to work on many levels, and then I joke with my husband all the time that we have to leave town so that I don't have to work while I'm at the grocery store. But I don't actually want it any other way. If I run into someone at the grocery store and they say, how are things going at the library? I fully expect that to happen, and I fully expect that opportunity as I'm picking which avocado I want to tell people what's going on. And so just with that in mind, as a well-being, personal well-being thing, it's also okay to say to somebody, thank you so much for asking. I have just a minute or two to talk to you, just to protect yourself a little bit, because my kids say that it takes me an hour to run in for one thing, and it's because I'm talking to people, I'm advocating while I'm buying groceries.
So a couple of other things too. So United Way is part of a state association, and we also have a lobbyist. I think most nonprofits are a part of some association, and They do a good job during legislative session of sharing information that we can in turn share with our donors. And we had a newsletter that we had created called Via United Way. And so it was a volunteer, invest, and advocate. So there was always an opportunity to do one of those three things in that email newsletter. The other thing that we do, and I know that Kayla does really well here locally, is also lift up our funded partners. So if they have something that they're talking about on social media, so if it's Medicaid cuts or the summer lunch programs or summer meal funding is being cut and it's being shared by one of our partners, we can in turn share that as well and just continue to communicate that with members of the public and with donors. And then the other thing that I facilitate in the Cedar Rapids area is a discussion series called the Civic Circle, and it's really just an opportunity to discuss the 9 different civic actions that you can take, things along the lines of voting and donating, of course, those things that I just mentioned, but other ways that you can volunteer and incorporate that in your work too. So again, anyone from the community can participate in those programs and do a deeper dive into issues that are important to them, and then start to create a plan that they can potentially address some of those issues.
Awesome, thank you.
I think the part of the question that maybe, that I just want to delve into a little bit more is just, the way in which policy conversations are happening right now is completely different than they were happening in the past. Sort of notoriously, doors are not being opened even if you go to Des Moines and take the time to go and speak to our elected officials who work for us. And that's a systemic change that is really hard to, it's really hard to have an impact and be able to have, if you can't have that conversation, you can't have that conversation. There's also been huge violations in the way that meetings were called. There's supposed to be a certain amount of time before a meeting, 24 hours, or what have you, depending on the body. And they're, sometimes just going straight into a meeting or doing it the next day. They're closing up shop at 6 p.m. and opening up shop at 8 a.m. the next day. And there's not enough of public notice to allow for the public to comment. And so being in a completely different terrain, I think it's really important for the public to understand that the rules have not officially been changed, but they've been changed in practice. And with that in mind, every single citizen, regardless of their party affiliation or what they care about, should be very concerned, because that actually disincentivizes people from wanting to be engaged in public discourse. And being engaged in public discourse is the key to our democracy. It's we really should be encouraging that. And so I want anyone watching this to understand that if the tables were turned and the doors were being closed in your face, I think you'd be pretty aggravated and pretty upset that you didn't get your opportunity to make your case. You can even go to Des Moines for a hearing and not be given the opportunity to speak. Only certain people are given the opportunity to speak, and people are cut off and talked over, and there's a certain amount of aggression in some of these meetings that is not civilized and not the kind of discourse that we should be having in a democratic process. And that's not new, but it's becoming the norm. And that's, I think, very concerning as well.
Thank you. As we move towards the end of this portion of the section, I wanted you all to just talk about if there's any strategies or mindsets or even partnerships that you're leaning towards that you would like to share with the community.
I think, as I had said before, as far as strategies, like just trying to find some joy in every day and finding that trusted confidant or someone that creates a safe space for you just to be able to talk your truth and to be as authentic and honest as you possibly can. At the same time, also recognizing that you do have other people who are counting on you in your life as well. I mean, I'd like some tips on that as well. I don't know that I'm necessarily the best person to answer that question. I mean, I think we're all trying to do the best we can with what we have.
Thank you.
I think in one of the things I learned during the pandemic was that we really had to identify what our core programs were and goals were and the things that we absolutely have to do because they are who we are, what our nonprofits stand for and how we want to move through the world. And I think similarly in this period of time, it's very important to be very planful in that way, you know, really talk with your team about this is what we are absolutely doing. That might change because of funding cuts. It might change from other things, might come in there. But this is what we're absolutely doing. And give yourself more breathing room than you would normally do, again, because there is way more information that's going to pull the rug out on a daily basis. And then also being very, very deliberate about when you're speaking as a person. When I'm advocating in the grocery store, I am Katie at the grocery store buying an avocado. I am not in the library. I'm not wearing my library hat in that moment. You are allowed to have a private life if you're a government person, and you're allowed, and even as a nonprofit leader, you're allowed to have a private life and have opinions. So I think it's important to, you know, make that division between the personal and the professional, so that you can speak freely about the things that you care about. And then another strategy for me has been making sure that I am bringing in more junior members of my team into conversations that they may not have been in before, may not have been privy to before, because the likelihood that I'm going to be brought out of something and need their help is increasing on a day-to-day basis. So I find myself in my weekly meetings saying, I just want you guys to know about this. I want you to know about this. I wrote a little brief on this. It's available here because I need them. I need them to step up as much as my organization needs me to step up. And I think we all saw a leveling up individually and collectively during the pandemic when we had to take on different new kinds of work. So in any way that we can see this as an opportunity for growth and an opportunity for expanding our own personal abilities and those on our teams, I think talk about that with your teams and say, you know, we're all in this together. We gotta do that.
Thank you. Well, at this time, I'd love to ask if anyone has any questions. We'll bring a mic out to you. Yeah. And I can go ahead and do it.
Will you be the runner?
I'll be the runner. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask?
Thanks, Kayla.
So as a fundraiser and fundraising professionals, how in this climate have you found that you don't shoulder all of the fundraising losses that maybe you've seen, or how do you balance trying to turn your entire organization into fundraisers to make up the potential losses? And just if you have any strategies for that, I'd love to hear them, or advice on more creative ways, like you said, getting volunteers involved, or ensuring that everyone knows every single dollar helps, even if you can't give what you gave before, kind of how Angelica was starting to say.
I think one of the things that and it's interesting, the role that I play at United Way in Cedar Rapids, because I have a fundraising background, but I'm doing community building work. So I have been quite deliberate in my entire time there, but I'd say more so in the last several months, and just bringing along all staffs to say we are all part of philanthropy for this organization and building connections, and perhaps it's introducing someone who is participating in a board leadership program who has never contributed a major gift or their company isn't involved in making those introductions with other people. And there was another thought, but it already flittered away with this fly that's around here.
You've got a really pesky fly flitting
Yes.
around here. I think, I'm not in danger of turning any more people on my staff into fundraisers because we have, we're a union shop here at the library and we have really distinct roles, and so those are great, wonderful limitations that allow people to focus on the work that they were hired to do. So I think about it a little bit differently as a government employee. I think about helping the public to understand how our institution is funded is really helpful. Our primary funder is the city of Iowa City, who is also being affected by all of this, both on a state and a federal level. And so helping the public to understand that, because I think if you're going to speak to anyone about continuing their funding for city services, it's the city. And then also looking at larger opportunities in our community, like the local option sales tax, which could generate $8 to $10 million a year within our community. It's estimated that we've left about $80 to $100 million on the table by not having a local option sales tax here. And there's some cross-community collaboration happening with that right now. Everyone benefits if all of the area communities that touch Iowa City and beyond are within the county are all having their own local option sales tax, and so making sure that that I understand that to the extent that I am able to speak about that with people, and I think also there's an aspect of this that pulling back the curtain again on fundraising activities and needs. I find that I'm listening even more acutely in meetings to what my colleagues are trying to accomplish, so that when I am reviewing grants and funding and opportunities, I'm, that scene in Beautiful Mind with all my brain's doing that, and I'm going, hold on a second. Actually, I think we could maybe structure a request this way, to try to draw those lines together. We are, I think, always in danger of becoming purely fundraising organizations. Like who's the last man standing when everything, is falling apart? During the pandemic, the conversations that we were having with the federal government as they required us to make disaster plans in order to get the funding was basically like, all right, well, if there's one person left running the organization, who is it? And my boss looked at me and he goes, it's you. So that you can fundraise, so that you can get money to bring us all back. And I said, so I'm sending the marketing communications, I'm doing everything. And that's what we agreed to with the federal government. It never got there. We were about 2 months away from that being the reality. So, I mean, we are the backbones of our organizations in moments like this where we're facing really meager, possibly disastrous times.
Wow, that's a hard comment to follow. To sit with that for a second. Thank you. That's big shoulders, big shoes, and to all of you who do fundraising, thank you. My name is Jeff Lauer. I've been a nonprofit volunteer, founder, executive director, consultant, helper. There's a process over the years in Iowa City that I've seen where nonprofits face adversity, and then they face seasons where there's more resources than they would have expected. And more recently, with these post-pandemic and pandemic funds, we saw some capacity, at which point more nonprofits can spring up, or one nonprofit can say, hey, here's an opportunity, but our mission's this. And so there's fission. People split and form new things. On the other hand, there are seasons in which boards exhaust, but the mission's still there, and another nonprofit is willing to come in and pick that up. My question to you is, in this season where it seems like scarcity is anticipated? Do you hear your nonprofit colleagues, do you see a discussion about the potentials for economy of scale, for merging, as staff might have to be downsized? If you guys are last people standing, maybe there's some duplication of effort. You mentioned this earlier about not duplicating effort when possible. Is that possibility on the horizon, not because I want that to happen, but because it's often verboten at a board meeting when somebody says, hey, do we have a plan to, instead of having 2 financial people, if we grow small enough, maybe we have 1 finance person and we start to partner out and see whether there's enough for a full time. Those kinds of conversations. Are those happening yet?
I think those kinds of conversations are happening all the time, but they're happening right now more often, but more conceptually at the moment. I think what people think happens when organizations combine is that, okay, maybe it's less duplication of services and maybe there's, less redundancy and we're able, but you generally need almost the same amount of hours from people. So the personnel being the largest expense, often bringing organizations together, that doesn't actually solve a lot of the money problems. It might, I think, help to have people have more specific roles, maybe instead of someone being a marketing and development director, which I think is always just like, wow, that's a huge job. There's then a marketing director and a development director, and that can be really wonderful for organizational maturity. I hope that sort of the other side of that coin is, how do we not fight for the scraps? How do we figure out how to advocate for all of us? Especially like with something like the local option sales tax. I mean, the old chestnut of pitting human services against the arts. I mean, that's already sprung up in these early conversations. And it all has value. It really does. We know it does. It's been studied again and again. So how do we not fight amongst ourselves? How do we really say, this will benefit all of us, and we'd like it to be structured in a way that is equitable and that we're held accountable, and we can tell the public how this taxation or this funding, whatever it is, was used in a way that had an incredible impact. And so I guess I have some cautions in there around merging always being the answer, and then cautions around us, fighting with each other for the scraps.
And I think just to build off of that, a lot of the work that United Way is a lead organization of in the Cedar Rapids community is coalition building, right? So we'll pull organizations who may be doing similar work, like the Alliance for Equitable Housing in the Cedar Rapids area, multiple organizations that are looking to address the inequities in housing and homelessness in the community. So a lot of coalition building happens. And then another thing that I have seen, so again, I don't foresee or haven't heard from my colleagues any organizations folding and going away, but even from my own organization, natural attrition, and we're not backfilling some of those positions. So, fewer people are doing the same amount of work. And then when people are leaving those positions, we've also done some reorganization. So in the past, we would have a leadership or a C-suite person in one position, and then we ended up changing that just so that we could continue with the other work that we've done. So I can imagine that a lot of nonprofit organizations do the same thing. So they're not backfilling positions, they're reorganizing as well.
Yeah, it's not a layoff if you don't fill the position.
Right. Then you suddenly are under budget on your payroll.
Yeah, suddenly you've got 20% less workforce doing the same 100% of the work.
And actually to that point too, again, one of the things that our leadership team has done, and we just did budget, so that's why this is top of mind, is that they also recognized how important it is to pay their nonprofit staff what they're worth. And so they actually did a study to make sure that some folks were all receiving like comparable salaries with their for-profit peers, and then we continue to get our raises every year, recognizing that if you don't have the staff there to do the work, then all the funding cuts in the world really don't make a difference.
Anyone
I
else?
think we had another question. Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any advice on how to find a middle ground in timely informing your supporters versus some of those fears and hesitations of spreading fear or being too repetitive in your messaging, donor fatigue, or just adding to the noise and drowning out other advocacy.
That's hard to do. Didn't we just say there's all the things, right? I don't know that I've found that. I think maybe I had an idea, I had a thought, but Katie, your turn.
Well, I think that, there's an aspect of making sure that you're sharing some wins, whether those may not be legislative wins, and those may not be, related to things that are happening on a federal or state level for your organization, but it might be, in your case over at UAY, the incredible participation of your kids in XYZ, right? I think we have to continue to share that impact and do that on balance with the challenges that we're facing. I sat down and was looking at the titles of an organization that shall remain nameless, and I was like, I'm not sure that even though I know the challenges they're facing have increased exponentially in the last 6 months, I think they started at like a 10 out of 10 in the freaked out subject lines of their newsletter, and they're still at a 10. And so I was observing the same thing that you're talking about. So yeah, I think we have to be very, very careful about that. So share the impact, share the wins, and then I think on a personal level, whenever I talk to people, I say, on a day-to-day basis, everything's great at the library. We have 120 people through our doors an hour. Our circulation is up. Participation in our summer reading program is up. It's just, we're really concerned about what's happening. We're not sure how it's going to affect us. And, make sure people understand that this is still a great place. And we're still, the air conditioning is cranking today and people are taking advantage of it. We're a cooling spot, and so, we have to also share those wins interpersonally. Did that address your question? Yeah? I know it's a hard one. It's a really hard one.
I can ask a softball.
Yeah, oh yeah, give us a softball. Thanks.
Go Hawks.
My favorite color is green.
I know, and I was like, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Taking off your fundraiser hat and putting on your donor hat, how can a nonprofit communicate to you most effectively?
I recently made a donation to an organization that I should have been donating to. I kind of couldn't believe I wasn't a donor to them when I thought about it. And they had the right person ask me. They had the right board member appeal directly to me and say, I'm kind of surprised you're not a donor. And I said, you know what, you're right. I'm surprised I'm not a donor. So, getting back to some of those fundraising basics, thinking about annual funding a little bit more of the way that we sometimes think about capital campaigns, which is like the right conversation with the right person at the right time, which takes a lot of care and a lot of management of data and a lot of understanding of people's relationships. But there's ways to gather that information from the people who are in a position to influence those gifts that can be acted upon. Some of that sort of internal moves management, the way that we can, manage those individuals and help them, feel confident and move through that. So yeah, that was the right person. They knew I'd known this person for 25 years, that I deeply respected her. And she made the ask, and I got on my phone right then and there. Did that, so.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree a personal ask is probably the best way, but I fully admit that I'm chronically online. So social media is still a win. And so a quick little story I'll share is that I had found out about a volunteer opportunity for an organization that I had not even heard of, but another friend of mine had shared this volunteer, and it included veterans. So I was like, okay, let me go volunteer for this. And then, of course, afterwards, I was like, I probably should make a pretty regular contribution, just even a $25 monthly gift, and then just started giving because, of course, they followed up with me and did all of the other traditional sort of moves management that Katie was referring to. But I think more than anything, right, it's like, you don't know what you don't know, so how do you communicate, like, what is it that your organization is doing? And that personal ask is first and foremost, but I find out about a lot of stuff online.
Yeah.
And I'm on every social media platform.
Oh, man. Ooh.
Unless there was a new one that came out yesterday, which there probably was. That my little grandchildren are probably on. It's probably on Roblox, if we're being honest.
No one's asked me for money on Roblox yet, so we'll see.
They might.
Just actually, some of the themes from these are kind of leading to what will be a poorly articulated question. But it started with talking about board and volunteer board kind of decreases. We talked about economies of scale, and then like which direction to go and not like kind of overwhelm your current supporters. That combined with local, state, federal, there's a lot of noise, right? So like what can you do to improve the signal both from your perspective, and then what might you do to help inform supporters or potential supporters to look for that signal, if that makes sense?
One of the things that I'm interested in, I'm serving on a government affairs committee for the Iowa Library Association, and I was trying not to overwhelm them with all of the ideas that I have about how to move forward in this next year. But one of the things I said was, when I saw the critical mass of people that came to the State House, and I know it didn't ultimately change what happened that day when we took civil rights away from trans Iowans, but that was, by all accounts, the largest turnout on the state capitol in the history of our state. And I said, what could we do to have people ready should we face the same kind of critical moment? And so I think part of boosting that signal is that preparation, is getting people to commit to being among, counted in that number on that day when they have to show up. And so on record, we don't want this. And I think when you ask people to be that person, they're paying closer attention too. They're saying, okay, like, is this the communication? Is this the one? It's like, not yet, guys. We're not there yet. What we're doing is working. What we're doing is helping. We're still got our eye on the ball. Are you in this group that says that you're going to drop everything and you're going to show up in Des Moines if needed? And I think everybody should steal that idea. I don't think it's an original idea. I think it's just an organizing tactic. And then the other piece of here, I'll let you go because I don't think I have this next thought fully cooked.
Oh, yes. I probably should have led with that I think out loud. So as I'm talking, I don't actually have the end of my sentence figured out, which is why those ideas continue to go away. And I had it. Nope.
Sorry,
it's gone.
I put you on the
You
spot.
put me on the spot and it's gone now.
Did that?
Oh, boost signal. Yes. One-on-one. So I do think, again, how can the nonprofit organizations boost that signal? It's just informing everyone. And, we kind of talked about a couple of different ways to do that. You're not going to get everyone all the time. You'll get some of the people some of the time. But then just giving them talking points and really highlighting the impacts of what's happening with any of the policies or funding cuts, et cetera. And then letting or encouraging them to have those conversations with their own network. So I think so much of this is going to happen in conversations with family, neighbors, coworkers, other people that are in our lives, and then just hopefully those folks continue to have conversations outside of that. So one-on-one, I think, is honestly one of the best ways that we can do this.
We had this conversation. We've got kind of a development officer work group. I don't know what it is. We get together. Some of the folks are here. It's a peer group. We get together, and I think we originally set out to be like, let's talk about different subjects, and now it's like a support group where we're all like, are you okay? I'm okay. How are we going to make it through these times? Which is also really, really important. But one of the things that we talked about originally was how can we break through the noise? And we talked about like thinking about like breaking through the noise by thinking about pretending like we're in a different decade. Sounds really funny, but for a minute there weren't like a lot of posters for bands up on light poles in Iowa City. Like people just like been like, everything's on Facebook now. I guess we don't do that. And like the only people that were putting the signs up on light poles were like the punk rock DIY scene, which then grew exponentially because people were like, oh, what's that? I'm only seeing that, right? So I've gone back to making handbills and handing them to people and giving them something physical that they will then have to take out of their pocket that night and maybe put on their fridge, right? I just missed an event that I would have loved to have gone to because it was only on Facebook. And I didn't hear about it any other way. And I am drowning in digital information and don't feel like I'm able to manage the digital waterfall of information anymore. And so, you know, like if it was 1995, how would you let people know what's going on? Well, you might call them, you might make a flat, you know, like going through that exercise a little bit. I think because we are, I mean, none of us are hearing about all the things we want to hear about because it's so easy to quote unquote communicate, but is it a communication if people aren't getting it, you know, in the digital atmosphere? So.
And I think it's interesting, though, that I confessed that I was chronically online, and you confess that it's overwhelming. So you've got two different perspectives, which is the same as we see out in the community. So there obviously is no one right answer. It's kind of whatever works best for you within your organization and the capacity that you have.
Yeah, we had a new fundraiser event for the library last April, and I had people who were so upset that they hadn't heard about it. And I would check when they would say that to me, and I'd say, okay, well, I did email them 3 times, and they were invited on Facebook, and I did send them a postcard. So you just, you know, like, there's just a lot of information. We're in this information age that's so overwhelming. So what I really needed to do is wheat paste their front door, and I didn't do that. I should have. Would have helped. Yeah,
There you go.
Any other questions from anyone? Well, before I thank our 2 panelists, I'd like to give you both an opportunity for any final words.
No. I mean, I do thank you all for coming. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in any of this. I just have my own experience that I can share, and hopefully by being up here, there's some things that resonated with you all, and perhaps a few things that you can take and implement within your organizations. And as I had said before, just creating that community of people that you can talk to and just kind of share your own experiences with. And so I open up myself to that. I do live in Cedar Rapids, but I come down to Iowa City quite often. I love a good cup of coffee, and I eat lunch and dinner. So if you're interested in coffee, lunch, or dinner, just to have someone to talk to, or if there was something that, you know, as you're going home today, later on, you thought, oh, I should maybe ask Angelica that, or I'm curious about XYZ, you know, please feel free to reach out. Was our contact information shared anywhere?
Not the contact, but I can get it out there.
Sure. And you can also just Google United Way East Central Iowa under the staff listing. I'm right there. So again, it's Angelica Veneta.
Yeah. I would just say that in moments like this, you know, none of us are perfect. We're not going to do any of this work perfectly. Just, you know, give yourself a lot of grace and give the people you're working with a lot of grace. the big joke in my office is I say, I'm perfect. How could this have happened? You know, like when something, it's just our joke because there's so much coming at us. And with that said, don't let perfection get in the way of getting something done that really needs to get done. You know, I don't think anything that we're doing is going to be such a disaster that we have to, pay for it with our lives. So, this isn't. We also like to say this isn't. We're not brain surgeons here. We're nonprofit workers. We're trying to do good in the world. And if you encounter resistance to the good things that you want to try to accomplish within your own organization, I just want to embolden you to, really get to the core of why it's being objected to with your organizations, because people are exhausted, and I think there's a lot of fear, and so it's really important to try to have maybe press pause for the day, come back to it, and try to have that conversation about why you're not able to move something forward that you feel is important in this moment right now where we're facing so many challenges. Yeah.
If you're not already registered to vote, do that. If you are registered to vote, make sure that it's active.
Yes.
Thank you for that last
Vote.
piece.
Yeah.
Well, again, I want to thank you, Katie and Angelica, for being here with us and discussing this. As we already talked about, if you have any questions afterwards, we'll put out some information about how you can get in touch with them. But thank you so much for being here this evening. Again, I'm with the Association of Fundraising Professionals. If you want to learn more about what we do, or you can come and talk to me afterwards. So thank you so much.
Thank you.